to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Jeremy Main, the Director of Athletics at Orem High School. Welcome to the podcast, Jeremy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience across the U.S. and across the world now, where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Yeah. I was listening to a couple months ago. You had Cody Valdez on. He's a Tooele grad. I'm also a Tooele High grad. Cody Valdez was a couple years older than me, but great family. Kind of grew up with them. My father coached wrestling with Rich for a few years. So graduated in 2002. I played football and basketball for all 4 years. Was honored to be an all region and all state my junior and senior year at Tooele High School. My senior, I played tennis, which was a little bit different. And was able to qualify for state there. Was a neat experience. After high school, I was brought on at Tooele High School and coached for a year in preparation for my LDS mission. Was the head freshman coach and offensive coordinator, and then helped out with the varsity. Went on LDS mission to Chicago, Illinois. When I came back, I had signed my national letter of intent to play football at SUU, and while I was on my mission, I got a new coach and pulled all the missionaries' scholarships, and so I came back and accepted a preferred walk-on at BYU in the spring of 2005. Had some injuries that spring, met my wife, who was a volleyball player at BYU, who was actually from Chicago, which is a kind of a unique story in and of itself. We decided that we were going to be married and wanted to have a change of scenery and a new experience. And so we decided to move back to Chicago. So finished my school out there. I actually walked on and played Division III basketball at North Central College in the suburbs, which is in Naperville, Illinois. Played there for a year and then transferred to Northern Illinois University to finish my teaching program and do my student teaching. During that time, I volunteered coaching at a high school, which was in Oswego, Illinois. The school was Oswego East High School. Volunteered while I was working and going to school. And about a week after I graduated, the principal called me in and said, "We have a job for you." And so right out of college, was able to get a teaching and coaching job. Coached football, basketball, did some track, and was also a radio announcer and public announcer for our spring sports, baseball, softball, and soccer, which was kind of a neat experience. So we were out there for about 15 years. Coached, taught. I was a strength and conditioning coach for my teaching profession, and then for the last 9 years, coached girls basketball, football, was a defensive coordinator and special teams coordinator. And then my springs were doing the radio calls. About 2018, we had a poll and pulse that we needed to move. And so we headed back out west. We had a connection through a family friend and took a job as the head boys basketball coach at Rock Springs High School up in Rock Springs, Wyoming. Taught and coached up there for 3 years. And then kind of a similar situation, had another friend reach out to me about a possible opening at Orem High School. So in 2021, I came down to Orem High School, and the last 2 years I was the head girls basketball coach. And then this last year I took over as the athletic director at Orem High School.
That is awesome. So many follow-up questions.
Yes, sir.
And of course, when you were at Tooele, but it takes me back to my days back in the 80s when I was at Jordan. I started in 79, and Jordan and Tooele up until probably 93, 94. It was
Mhm.
always Jordan, always Tuilla, always
Yep.
Murray.
Yep. So
Uh,
my
every once
father.
in every once in a while would get Uinta in our league.
Yep.
I know we had Union a couple of times.
Yeah.
Used to be Judge in our league back then. But of course, Toole has grown so much now, and they've got Stansbury. Now you're getting another high school, and so
Right.
that's incredible. But I'm interested in something you said about that's another story about. I'm interested about how you met your wife in Chicago. So maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah. So my last area on my mission, I served in a place called Oswego, and my wife actually um, played volleyball at Kent State in Ohio. And so when I was on my mission, I met her family while she was away at school, and um, didn't have any pulse of kind of who she was and what she was doing, other than I knew they had a daughter that was playing volleyball at Kent State. And so I left that area and went home, and she transferred from Kent State to BYU. And she didn't know why she needed to do that, but she did so. And so when I was enrolled at BYU, or right before I was enrolled at BYU, I got a phone call from a family friend that said, "Hey, just so you know, my wife's name is Jenny. Jenny's transferred to BYU, and she doesn't really have a whole lot of friends out there. And so maybe you could take her around and show her the scenes and show her the sights of Provo." That was her sister doing a little bit of matchmaking. And so we met and hit it off, and the rest is history, as they say.
Fascinating. I have another question that you may not have a great answer for. Have you been to Kent, Ohio? And the reason I ask is I've only been there once. I have a good AD friend that lives in Kent and was 8 or 9 years old during that tragedy in
Yeah.
1970. And he said he could see the National Guard, the tops of the trucks and the tanks going down the street. So I'm wondering if you've been there and what's your impression? Because I visited there and I saw the sign that still has the bullet hole in it, and it was kind of frightening.
Yeah. So when we were first married, we went back to Kent to help the coach that was there run a summer camp. She liked to bring back old players and alumni and help. And so um, we went back there and visited some old friends and actually helped the coach work a summer volleyball camp. And we toured the facility and toured the campus and saw, there are lights and there's, standing vigils and statues of where those individuals that lost their life, they still are. And, we still saw the structure that had the bullet hole in it. And it's kind of a reverent, quiet, kind of a serene feeling when you're there, knowing that you're a part of that history.
Yes, it is. Let's have you talk for a moment about growing up in Tooele and the youth participation. I assume even though it's a smaller town, you had quite a bit of chance to play little league sports out there.
Yeah, my father, he moved to Tooele 78, 79. So when you're talking about that region, whenever we talk about it, he talks about playing Jordan and playing Bingham and playing South and, kind of having those rivalries with those schools. And so I grew up, my dad was my coach in everything. He coached Little League football, he coached baseball. He was a professional softball player. So we were always involved in sports in one way or another. So that's started playing football, when I was 7 years old. I know that you're only supposed to start when you're 8. So I had a little bit of a jump start there. Heavily involved in sports. My older brother, he's 5 years older than me. He was an all-state football player and track. So I kind of grew up not forced to do sports, but it was kind of the culture of our family. That's just kind of what we did. So involved in athletics my whole life. We travel all over Utah, following different teams. My parents would say they put more miles on cars than probably anybody, following kids around the state, watching their kids. There was 4 of us, 3 boys and a girl in our family, and we were involved in sports growing up. And we tried. My dad did a really good job trying to give us different experiences, playing different things. I was always really tall, and so I never really took to wrestling. But I had a younger brother that tried wrestling. My dad coached wrestling for a few years with Rich out in Tooele, and so that really benefited me as an athlete, having those different experiences, playing different sports, not being so set on one individual sport, and kind of grew our foundation athletically, and kind of grew our network with different people and different coaches, and giving us that experience. And so Tooele was for a short time. They had a lot of success when I was coming up through high school. They hadn't had a whole lot of success. My first coaches were Rick Harrison and Papa Harrison. I don't know if you know them.
I know both of them. Yes.
Yeah, great coaches. They had a profound impact on me. It was my sophomore year that was Rick's last year at Tooele. Before I think he went to Grantsville, I think afterwards. And that was before Tyler Anderson and Lee Leslie and those guys took over.
Mhm.
But yeah, great experiences. And it was just like everything that we did in our feeder programs was to prepare us to be a Buffalo and to prepare us to play for Tooele. And so a lot of culture, a lot of pride that we have in our hometown.
Fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's have you share with our audience some of the mentors you've had in your life, both as a young man and then older in your professional life.
Obviously, I'll go back and my dad was a great mentor, coached me in everything. Vivid memories of experiences that we had coaching, him coaching me. He was the SRO at the school, so I could never get into any trouble. Not that I wanted to, but he was always there, and he always had he had an impact on me. My older brother, he was a guy that I wanted to be like. He was pretty popular, and he was a very good athlete, and he wanted to play college and did some professional stuff. And he was a great mentor. I don't know if he meant to be, but he was someone I looked up to. In terms of teachers, Mel Roberts, he was my first math teacher. I know he's in the Hall of Fame. Great swim coach. Went to some, and that was another thing we did in the summer times was we always went to his camps and learned how to swim and stay in shape that way. And he taught me the acronym ASSUME. He's the first one to teach me that, and that you never assume anything. And so he had a great impact on me. Coaches, Coach Harrison and Papa Harrison, my first high school coaches, and taught me the foundations of the game of football. Coach Davila was a basketball coach out in Tooele at the time. He had an impact on me. Eric Gunnarsson was my offensive line coach, and he was a social studies teacher that I had, and I think he still coaches at Lone Peak. So he's been around. Tyler Anderson was a coach that came in my junior year and kind of revitalized Tooele football. Lee Leslie, again, we go back a long time with Lee Leslie and his family, and was able to grow up with his kids, and great mentors. And as I've been a coach, working with different athletic directors and different coaches, my time in Illinois, Patrick Molinari, he was a great mentor. Ryan Velasquez, Abe Corretto, athletic directors, De Bruckner, had a big impact on me early on and kind of gave me the drive and the passion to want to excel in coaching and eventually get into athletic administration.
Thank you for sharing that. Some great people. Let me have you talk about taking over as the AD at Orem. Orem has a rich history.
Yeah.
Athletic history, a lot of success. Is that more pressure, or did you have to get to know the community? Or because I don't want to say you're an outsider, but you were back in the Midwest for quite a few years before you came back.
When Tyler Anderson took over at Tooele, he's an Orem guy, and he spoke a lot about the history at Orem High School and the culture that's there. And so I always kind of had this thought that Orem kind of stood on this pedestal athletically and the culture that existed there. And so when I was in Rock Springs and I was toying with the idea of coming down to Orem, I had thought there's no way I'm even going to be considered because of their rich tradition, and they probably had a line out the door of candidates for people that wanted to come here and coach. And I just so happened to know the right people, I guess. And when I had no intention when I came here to take over as the athletic director. I was going to continue to coach and teach. And when Bob Steele retired, they sat in a meeting and they thought about potential candidates, and my name came up just because of my experiences outside that I might be able to bring to Orem. And so at first there was a little bit of pressure, and I was a little bit nervous about the culture and whether I was able to kind of live up to the expectations that are here. But I haven't really felt that. As I've taken over, there's been a lot of support. There's been a lot of open-mindedness about kind of where I've come from and my experiences, and not a lot of people that are thinking that, there's one way to do things. And so there's been a lot of support from the school community, from administration, from coaches, in terms of trying to bring Orem maybe into the 21st century with some technology and some facilities and some culture stuff and some branding stuff. And so with that nervousness, it's been met with a lot of support.
Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about the job of AD now. And you haven't been an AD that long, but talk about just the changes you've seen since you became the AD.
A lot of my experiences are based on, my dealings with athletic directors in the places that I've worked. Junior high athletic directors, and it's a little bit different everywhere I've been. And so coming here, you think that there's only one way to be an athletic director. And so when I was in Illinois, the athletic department was almost separate from the school, in that there was an athletic director that was an administrator over athletics. There wasn't an assistant principal over athletics. There was an assistant athletic director. There were event supervisors. There were secretaries that were specific to athletics. And so they ran the athletic side of things. And so there was not much pull or push, I should say, maybe from school administration. And so I went from there to Rock Springs, and that kind of changed. And the athletic director was also the assistant principal. And so they were wearing multiple hats. Mm-hmm. And coming here, the athletic director kind of falls under, the principal, the assistant principal who's over athletics. And so there's kind of this hierarchy that you have to kind of deal with and work with. But I guess my experience is that it's just kind of different everywhere that you are. And I don't think there's one particular right way to do it, as long as there's great communication between administration, between the athletic department, and between coaches. In terms of what's changed throughout being an athletic director here is the involvement at the association. I think there's great support there. There's great resources that are available, probably more than there ever has been. In this transition process, I've spoken to the athletic directors that I've worked for and talked to them about my work with the association and different clinics and different workshops and conferences. And a few of them, I said, man, I wish I had that. I wish I had those resources, and I wish I had that support from the state and that inclusiveness that the state provides here in Utah. And so I think that's kind of a change between both programs, or between both schools that I've been at.
Excellent. Talk about your journey with the UIAAA. I don't want to say you're new to Utah, but you had been gone for so long. How did you find out about it? How did you become involved?
I kind of jumped right in and wanted to get involved as soon as I could. Lee Gilly reached out and asked about possible representatives from each region to be involved in ADEC. And I'm one of those, I just want to jump right in, and I want to get new experiences, and I want to learn, and I want to kind of grow in my profession. And so I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even know what the acronym ADEC meant, but I knew I wanted to work with the state association and wanted to kind of get that experience. And so I've worked with state associations in the past through physical education and through strength and conditioning. So this is a little bit of a different situation, but I've been the Region 8 rep for ADEC for this year. And it's been a great experience in terms of like rubbing shoulders with other great ADs, people like yourself, and that have been around the state and been around the profession for a long time. And then just getting a lot of experience in terms of how that side of athletics work with the rules and policies and regulations and scheduling, and getting to meet up at the offices up at the state gives you also a chance to connect with the directors, the executive directors up at the state, and kind of get their thought processes on things. I've been able to go to the state conferences and different workshops and take, different classes and stuff that are offered through the state. And so, to be a part of that program has been a benefit to me. As I'm kind of getting done with my RAA and my CAA certifications, it'll allow me to have opportunities to potentially to teach and to be a part of that association a little bit more and to be involved. And so thus far, half a year in, maybe a little more half a year in, it's been a great experience for me.
Very good. Some great insight. Thanks for sharing. Let me ask you a follow-up on an earlier question that I failed to make. Did you say you spent some time in Naperville?
Yeah.
In Chicago? No, but that was on your mission, or you were teaching there?
So Naperville, they were in our region, or our conference back then. And so Naperville was kind of the hub for shopping and that's where a lot of the conference offices were. And that's, spent a lot of time in Naperville working as well.
Well, the reason I ask is a good friend of mine Doug Smith used to be the athletic director at Naperville, probably in the 2000s and maybe into the 2000 teens. Wondering if you ever crossed paths. So
No, it's such a different culture. There's so many schools, so many people, so many great people, great coaches, so many administrators. Naperville, so you have Naperville Central, you have Naperville North High School, you have Neuqua Valley, you have Waubonsie Valley. I mean, within that small, maybe
yeah, I think
50
he may
mile
have been at,
radius.
I think he might have been at Naperville North, but I could be, he was either North or Central. He was one of the
Okay.
Napervilles.
Yeah, those are big schools, powerhouse schools in terms of athletics. I actually tried to interview for a teaching and coaching position at Naperville North early on in my career. And one of those where it's so difficult because people don't want to leave because it's just got a great school culture.
Sure. Jeremy, what's one myth about athletic administration that you would like to debunk for the general public out there listening?
Um, Again, it's been different everywhere I've been in terms of the roles and responsibilities of an athletic director. I think one of the myths is that you're constantly having to deal with the negative sides of athletics, maybe the phone calls from angry parents, the having to deal with maybe the negative behavioral sides to athletics. That's a very, very small percentage. It is a part of it, but it's a very small percentage of kind of what we do. I think that may change as I have more years in this position. But it hasn't been the case thus far. I think the thought process and outlook that you have as an athletic director can change what others might think to be a negative into something that really isn't that big of a deal. Maybe they blow it out of proportion or whatever it may be, but kind of choose to focus on what will make this experience better for everyone involved. And so I don't feel as if I get a phone call from a parent, I'll take that as an opportunity to learn and to take constructive criticism and to kind of grow in what we're trying to do, and that all stakeholders in some way have a say and they have an opinion and they have a voice, and to try to listen to those things. And just understanding that you're not going to make everybody happy, but at the end of the day, it's what's right for kids.
Yeah, and let's not forget that. I'll echo that. Let's do what's right for kids. That is a great statement. So thanks for sharing that. What's the favorite part of your job as the AD?
I think just getting to connect with coaches, sharing ideas and plans and creating success within their program, having a small part of that, being able to work with administration and other stakeholders, school community councils, and helping those things kind of come to fruition. Still getting to connect with students on more of an administrative planning, getting their input on how we can make things better within our school culture. Creating opportunities for them to take leadership responsibilities. At Orem High School, we have what's called the SALT program, Student Athlete Leadership Team, and creating a curriculum that allows our students here who are asked to be captains and asked to be leaders of their program, giving them resources and giving them training and leadership on how to do that. So that's been an enjoyable experience. Orem is unique in that it's a little bit of an older school, like we kind of talked about. There's a lot of tradition and school spirit. However, it seems to have gotten stuck into this is what we've always done, and this is how we've always done things, and people kind of get stuck in that thought process. And so it's not a bad thing necessarily, but to kind of bring new ideas and new thought processes and to update our facilities and maybe rebrand a little bit to bring us into the 21st century has been fun. I've loved kind of being part of that process, and I've got great support from our administration. Our principal told me the other day, she called me in and said, I really love your passion and your enthusiasm for the athletic department and what you kind of want to do, but we may not have all the money to do all those things. And so let's maybe slow it down a little bit. And so I'm more of the squeaky wheel, gets the oil. And so not have the money, but we'll definitely create the plan to find it, to update so we can make these experiences for the kids better.
Excellent. Let's finish with a couple of questions. The first one being, Jeremy, I need 2 suggestions that you have for a brand new AD, realizing that you're a brand new AD yourself, and they need to follow your 2 suggestions in order to become a success. What would your 2 suggestions be?
So I think my first thing would probably just get involved as much as you can. Get involved in the state associations, pay your dues, go to your conferences, go to your clinics, be involved in your region meetings, and have a voice, have a plan going into those meetings, so that people understand that that you have a pulse and that you have a say in what you want for your school. Creating kind of creating your own brand of who you are, I think, is important too, and what you represent, and kind of sharing those things with your school administration, sharing them with your coaches, what your vision is, kind of your mission statement. That may take time. Obviously, early on, if you're an athletic director, I spent all last summer trying to figure out what my vision was for the athletic department, what I kind of wanted to do, and creating those plans, and kind of having the realization that not everything's going to happen right away, and having a 3-year plan, 5-year plan. What's the program going to look like 5 years from now, and what impact are you going to have, and how you're going to pull as many people as you can into that process. So another suggestion would be to make sure you're delegating and not thinking that you need to do it all yourself. Create programs and create systems and create committees in your process. We're rebranding right now, and I have a committee of about 8 people, and taking ideas in terms of what we want our logos and colors to look like. I don't want to say that I should be the end all say all at times. I think we need to involve as many people as we can. And I think that leads to success. I learned as a young person to put as many people around you that know more than you as you can, and that'll benefit you as an administrator. That'll benefit you as a person, because then you're going to learn and grow from it.
Very well said. Thanks for sharing. We'll finish with this. Jeremy, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Coming from Chicago, am I a White Sox fan or am I a Cubs fan?
That is a great question. So let us know.
Is
2 questions: Cubs or the White Sox, and is the South Side of Chicago the baddest part of town?
It's funny, because of the WGN, everyone got to listen to Eddie Carey and watch the Chicago Cubs and watch the Bulls beat the Jazz back in the 90s. And so I kind of grew up a Cubs fan. And so when we moved to Chicago, we were about 40 miles from Wrigley Field. And so we got to spend quite a few summers going to games, and was able to be in the crowd when they won the NLCS back in 2016, the year they won the World Series. And honestly, the worst part of Chicago is not necessarily the South Side. It's more the East Side of Chicago, Western Avenue and east of Buckingham Fountain. There's some pretty rough areas that I served there as a missionary, and then got to visit when we played some inner city schools. So.
That is fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that. On that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Jeremy Main, the Director of Athletics at Orem High School in Orem, Utah. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Jeremy.
Thanks, Hutch. I appreciate you.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.